Yep.
And so when you add to that something, when you have like a kid or someone who is impaired in some fashion, then it's just very, very natural for parents or for people to want to take extra care for it. They go out of the way extra. And it's out of love. It's 100% out of love.
Yep.
But they accidentally prevent that person from being able to learn these skills, learn these things that they need to learn in order to be independent.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Infinite Abilities Podcast. I am your host, Nick Yerhart, and we are here to encourage each other to find our own unique abilities. Let's go. All right, everyone. My guest today is Ernest, and man, this guy is incredible. And I've been looking forward to recording this for a while, and I'm so excited. He's got some rules that I love, and I know he's going to share all of them with us, and it's going to be a great episode. So, Ernest, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Ernest Ellender, my name. I grew up here in Houma, Louisiana, in South Louisiana, in Cajun land. My family was really big into education. I went to New Orleans for high school, Jesuit, and then I went out to California I did my undergraduate here also. Went out to California to get my doctorate in clinical psychology. Worked as a clinical psychologist for a while, and now I'm doing life coaching. And just 2 months ago, after working on it for about 7 years, finally published my first book called This Is How We Heal from Painful Childhoods. So, just a Louisiana boy.
I love it. And, your book name is so awesome. This is how we heal from our childhood. Because as a coach myself, I've realized that a lot of the things that people struggle with as adults actually stem from something that happened in their childhood. It's like every person that I have, you can dig that out of them, and then they're like, whoa. Because a lot of times you don't realize what that thing was, and it takes a bit to kind of figure out what it was. But then once the client figures it out, they have like an aha moment, and then they're like, oh, and then we can start to work through it. I don't like to say get over it, but work through it, learn how to cope and all that.
Yeah, I think our childhood sets us up both for great triumphs and our strength, and then also a lot of obstacles that we don't realize, until we kind of can, like you said, put your finger on it and, oh, that's why. Have those aha moments. And sometimes after the fact, and in hindsight, it just seems so obvious, many of these things. But I find a lot of the times people in their teens and in their 20s are so young and strong and just out there surviving that they don't slow down to kind of take inventory and look into these things. And then a lot of times in the 30s, they run into more difficulties and they start reaching out to people like you, offering the coaching or therapists and stuff. And then they get to have those aha moments, and it's kind of unbelievable. I love the idea of just removing this obstacle so that they can just shoot ahead forward and build on those strengths that they have,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's actually a good way to put it, that they immediately shoot forward. Like it's just like, boom. They're like instantly better because they realize, the problem. And it's incredible.
Exactly. Some of these self-limiting thoughts, like, and I'll just throw out some of the chapter titles, some of the rules, and some rule number, let's see, I think it's 3. Traumalize or just that, traumalize. And traumalize are little rules that, as a kid, when you're experiencing something really challenging, a little young brain makes a little rule that kind of becomes subconscious, but it guides us. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And if we're an adult and we're just thinking, should I go out for this new job or not? Well, no, I'm not good enough. So it's a self-limiting thought. And as soon as you remove that thought, it's like, oh, wait, you mean I am good enough? I just been
Mm-hmm.
self-limiting all these years.
Yep.
Remove that.
Yep.
It's like, oh, well, now what's available? Just the world is available. What's whatever you want to chase down and get. Remove these self-limiting trauma lies. Or yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I know that you want to go through your rules with me and see what we can kind of uncover. And I'm excited to do this.
You know, I was, you know, we talked briefly a few weeks ago, and I was just really mulled over my head a lot. And I was hoping to, let's see, well, for one, for example, overindulged parenting, overindulged dynamics is something that, if we wanted to define overindulged dynamics, is when I care for somebody and I will say or do anything to try to immediately remove any suffering of this person. And in doing so, if I hurry up and go in and take care of this kid and do everything for them, and it's out of love, then that person fails to develop skills and things that they can use to function independently.
Yep.
And so when you add to that something, when you have a kid or someone who is impaired in some fashion, then we have, it's just very, very natural for parents or for people to want to take extra care for. They go out of the way extra, and it's out of love. It's 100% out of love.
Yep.
But they accidentally prevent that person from being able to learn these skills, learn these things that they need to learn in order to be independent.
Yep.
And I was, you know, you were telling me you've going, just your journey has been really awesome to me, you know. And I was wondering, at what age was it that you decided you really wanted to be as independent and productive as possible?
So I would say that would be actually around age 4 and 5, because at age 4, my dad asked me if I wanted to see if I could learn how to walk. Because, mind you, the doctor said that I would never walk.
Oh,
and
okay.
My mom, a young mother, she had me when she was 17. So, she just took the doctor's word, which is totally okay. That's what a lot of people do. But my dad came along, and which, when I say came along, my dad is not my biological dad.
Okay.
But, his name was Dave. I lost him 4 years ago but, yeah, he, at age 4, he asked me, hey, do you want to see if you can learn how to walk on your own? And I was like, yeah. So him and my mom worked with me basically every day for like 6 months to a year. And then finally I was able to take my own steps on my own.
Ah, fantastic.
So, yeah.
That's wild. So when you get somebody who understands the need for repetitive, constant learning and practice to be able to get somewhere, as opposed to, well, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Awesome. Right. So I'm curious also, another one of the, let's see, look at my little notes here. That's right. Another one of the rules is the pendulum effect is a real thing. It's a natural thing that comes along with trauma. So a lot of times, there's this pendulum, it swings from one side to the other.
Yep.
Sometimes when we're trying to encourage somebody to do something, we can go overboard. We can push too hard.
Yep.
Experience any of that, of being pushed too hard, or not necessarily too hard, but in a negative fashion?
Yeah, in the negative fashion, yes. My dad was very strict. I mean, it was his way or the highway. That's kind of how I was raised.
Okay.
And so it was, tough. Like, it was basically what I call tough love. I had chores every day on the farm, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to get them done. I was grounded, so I guess for me, that's kind of what I went through, was just like the tough love side of that. And it was just, he always told me, don't let your disability stop you.
Mm-hmm.
Just figure out your own way to do everything if you have to. Because there's no
Yeah.
one way only to do things. There's many different ways. So
I
I
see.
I thank him for the tough love like that now. But at the time, oh man, as a kid, I did not like my dad a lot of the time. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we loved each other a lot. So
That's one of the things. I don't know. I think you said you work with parents
mm-hmm.
of special needs kids, huh?
Yep.
That's one of the things you do coaching wise.
Yeah, that's one. So I've only worked with like a couple outside of coaching. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't actually had a parent as a client yet.
Okay.
My clients so far have had special needs themselves. So,
Okay.
so yeah, when you're a coach, you kind of, whoever wants your help, if you can help them, you help them.
Yes, and this is where again my brain just goes. Just when you said you would like to work with parents,
Exactly. Yep.
and that's where it's really exciting to me in the sense that you're in such a wonderful position, having experienced what you experienced and having learned all these different things, and
Yep.
to be able to help parents to understand that fine line between overindulging, doing everything for them, and then staying away from the pendulum effect, which is a natural part of trauma world, natural
Yep.
part of, and that's pushing too hard. That
Yep.
there's an old-fashioned sense of tough love that's kind of old-fashioned, lots of spankings and that kind of stuff, and
Yep.
and then a lot of the time, maybe in the last 30, 40 years, a lot of the parenting has gone to the other end of the pendulum, which is too overindulging and too permissive.
I agree.
So in that rule, the pendulum effect is a natural effect, a natural response to trauma.
Yeah.
We look for trying to be in the middle of the pendulum, where we want to have the same effect of having the child learn these skills. But we'd rather do it through a lot more like positive rewards and goal setting and things like that.
Yeah. And I would like to say, like, my parents, my mom was on the one side of the pendulum, and my dad was on the other. So I guess between the both of them, I kind of met in the middle.
Outstanding.
So
Outstanding.
Yep.
Let's see. One of the other ones that really came to mind is one of the other rules is, let's see, we're responsible for the decisions that we're aware of.
Ooh,
all right.
that's a
The
good one.
concept of that, when we're coming from childhoods where there's a lot of stress and whatnot, very oftentimes we're just not aware of things. And so as we become aware of them as adults, if we choose to follow that rule, then we have to hold ourselves increasingly responsible for that. And in this context, that one came to mind when you were telling me afterwards, when thinking about your story, just because after your father and your mother showed you that you're capable of more than the doctor had said you're capable of.
Yep.
At that point, after they've shown you that potential, from then on, if you choose to follow that rule, it becomes your responsibility to keep doing that, to keep pushing that boundary.
Yep.
So I didn't realize it was at 4 years old that you first started to decide on that, to follow that rule, which is I will hold myself responsible for doing more than people said that I could do.
Yeah.
What was an example of a little bit older, something that people didn't think you'd be able to do, but you did it anyway?
Well, we'll start with when I was 15 years old. I wanted to get my driver's license.
Oh,
Now, mind you, my dad bought me my first pickup when I was 11. We lived on a farm. So
farm life, yeah.
I had a truck. I drove it all the time, so I knew how to drive. But when I went to start taking the classes, I had to go see doctors to get approved,
Okay.
neurology doctors, brain doctors to see if I was, capable of driving, if I had the reflexes and all of that. And,
Yes.
that was a struggle, a big struggle. They didn't want to approve me, because my hands don't work the greatest, but we fought for 6 months, and finally through enough testing, and I had to do simulated like driving things and whatnot. Then they approved me to get my license. So, but like that was a time where I was just like, I'm not giving up until I have my license, because I know I can do it. I've been doing it for 4 years now. So
Yeah.
it's like, I knew I was fine, but it's just, and I understand it's hard for doctors to just sign off. There's,
Yeah, I know there's a lot of, especially in the medical world in America, there's a lot of fear of liability. So,
exactly.
oh, well, if we do this, then he might, and so they tend to tell us that we can't do stuff or it's not advisable.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And, I just gotta say, I got my license at 16 years old, just like anybody else would. And I'm now 32 years old. And I've only been involved in 3 accidents, which have all been me getting rear-ended. Not my fault. Just, I was in the wrong spot at the wrong time. That's it. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Amazing, man.
Thank you. And driving is my passion. It's one of my passions, because when I get behind the wheel, my disability disappears. It really,
okay.
I don't feel like I have CP at all. It's just, I drive. I'm a good driver. Anybody that knows me will tell you that. So, yeah.
Oh, man. What do you drive, by the way? I'm a nerd car. A car nerd.
Depends on the day.
Okay.
I currently only have 5 vehicles. So, yeah, I have a Tahoe, Impala, and then my other car that I drive is a 96 Eagle Talon, which is the same thing as a Mitsubishi Eclipse. So it's like a sports car.
Yeah,
and that car is actually a 5-speed manual.
Oh,
so
wow. That's
I drive
fun, huh?
manual also.
That's all I like to drive. I have I actually have a farm truck, a 2001 Toyota Tacoma with manual. I just love the manual. Yep. You just feel so connected to the vehicle, huh?
You do.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Which another one of the rules that came to mind after we discussed our stuff. The rule number 5 is healing requires training, education, and empathy for all. And when we get into special needs populations that you work with, that's where there's so much room for education, not just the formal stuff, but practical stuff.
Yep.
And because it's often so unique, each situation is so unique.
Yep.
We can only rely on so much from like a regular, like the regular physician who would see you and tell you this part.
Exactly.
And they're so specialists that say neurologically this, muscularly this, psychologically that. And they meet you and do a few tests. And that's where I've always as a therapist and then as a coach, that became a rule because it encouraged people to look past just what one or two people told them, to look past it, to keep educating, keep finding new sources of information, keep looking for, keep consuming, keep listening to podcasts that talk to the topic. Hire different professionals to give you a professional take on things. But to keep in it.
Yep.
So healing from stuff in our childhood it requires so much. They have the education. So that education is like just learning information-based stuff. Like learning just about muscles and things like that. And then the training part. And training is where we physically run ourselves through repetitions to develop a new skill. Like you said, learning how to walk, what you said, 6 to 12 months. Yeah, that'd be an example of training, in the sense that education, you can learn about how kids learn how to walk, but then you train to actually do it. It requires both of those things to heal and excel in the world, right?
It does.
Let's see. Okay. Another one, and I don't know if this relates to your situation much at all. It's just this concept of rule number 13, secrets destroy. And this is something that I really wanted to, I guess, just impress upon your audience in the sense that families of all different sorts experience trauma and chronically stressful childhoods. Yeah. And when we have special needs situations, that is a at-risk population for additional trauma or abuse. When that is the case, as with general population, secrets destroy follows this concept that as long as we maintain secrets, whether it's shame about a family secret or not wanting to get in trouble for this or that, that secret remains isolated. And as long as it remains isolated, it means that we are not able to do something about it. It's not able to have input from other people. It's not able to be addressed, right? It just stays, and it doesn't just stay there. Oftentimes it builds. It builds in toxic shame. It builds in fear, whatnot. And therefore, what do we do about it? Each of the rules, by the way, explain the concept, like secrets destroy. So once we understand, in isolation, our thinking and our behaviors can get really, really kind of go off the rails and get really, really unhealthy. A family in isolation, like that's why cults are really problematic, because they're isolated from the rest of the community that would tell them, like, hey, that's kind of getting crazy out there, So any family that holds these secrets, the thinking and behaving can get really out there. So each rule explains the issue, the problem, the variable that we need to deal with, and then offers some guidance as far as what do we do about it. How do we talk about it? Where do we talk? What's a healthy way to start talking about it? Whatever those things are. And I'm wondering, in the special needs communities, what are some things that people are kind of afraid to talk about, or kind of taboo, or that they don't want people to know about, that are very healthy to actually talk with someone about?
Yeah, like things that I've come across myself and with my clients is like shame. You're ashamed because you're different, or you put a burden on somebody else. But it's hard to really talk about that. It's hard to open up and explain, like, I'm ashamed because you know, I need help with certain things.
Mhm.
So I feel like I'm less than
Mhm.
somebody else. And that feeling of less than, that can honestly destroy a person. And it almost destroyed me a few years ago. So, it's...
Okay. When we talk, one of the rules, let's see, which rule is that? Rule number 7, we got to remove shame, learn from guilt, show remorse, and build esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And we clarify the difference between a normal, like I say, normal, a natural level of shame is when the emotion of shame can be a pro-social emotion in the sense that I'm a little bit ashamed of not being enough, so I'll work harder to fit in and to do well for ourselves.
Exactly.
So a little
Yeah.
bit of shame can be pro-social and
good. Yeah.
It's when it gets
Yeah.
to be too much.
Yep.
It becomes toxic. It becomes toxic in our lives, huh?
Yep.
Where we not are just a little shameful of or fearful of being a burden, but
Mm-hmm.
too much. It becomes just too much.
Yep.
We begin to hate ourselves instead of just be a little cautious or whatever.
Yeah. I went down that road.
Went down
because
okay.
Yep, because like for me, my whole life up until a few years ago, I would basically try to hide my disability.
Mm-hmm.
Well, trust me, you can't hide this. But like that's what I had in my mind. Like I tried to be as let's say quote unquote normal
Mm-hmm.
as I could, and I was constantly worried about what other people were thinking of me, like out in public.
Yeah.
I wouldn't talk to people I didn't know. Like if I went to a restaurant, I would have whoever I was with order my food just so I didn't have to talk to the waiter. Yeah. So that over time, it takes a toll.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yet here, now, you are interviewing me on a broadcasting to the world, speaking your voice, right?
Exactly.
What was it that, I'm curious before I tell you some of the suggestions in the book, how were you able to turn that around? What went from trying to hide it to just broadcasting it boldly? So boldly.
I started listening to a podcast, and for anybody listening, look up the Mindset Mentor by Rob Dial. He's one of my mentors. I've actually gotten to speak with him. It was incredible. And but awesome. His podcast is what changed my entire life for the good. Because when I started listening to him, I was depressed. I had suicidal thoughts. It was not a good place. And the world works in wonderful ways. I somehow found his podcast. I was out mowing my lawn. I listened to the first episode and then just kept listening the rest of the entire day because he helps you understand yourself and understand why you feel certain ways, helps you realize like your mindset. And I quickly realized I was a very negative person. My mindset was always negative. I was always looking at the bad in every situation. And over time, you can work through that and figure out how to look at the good in situations, even if they're bad at the time. You can, a lot of times in the moment, you can come up with some sort of positive, but if not, it'll happen down the the road. And I go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounds like it wasn't one thing that he said, but a
No,
stream of things, that a bunch of little
exactly.
skills that he's advocating and whatnot.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's ever just one thing. One thing cures all. I don't think that exists.
That is specifically going back to that other rule. Healing requires education, training, and empathy for all, because there tends to be this, the desire for a magic pill or a magic bullet, whatever, that to do the trick. And oftentimes we'll have an epiphany that kind of be like an educational moment where I realize, I'm a very negative thinker. I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Was just realizing it doesn't turn you into a positive person.
No.
Next, I have to practice thinking more positive on a daily basis, catching yourself, and then correcting yourself. So we call it like thought correction or cognitive restructuring. They have all these different terms for it. Mindfulness comes in there. All these different skills to do that.
Yeah, like one thing that reminded me of that he talks about a lot is, sometimes you can't control your first thought, but you can always control your second thought. And that stuck with me because, like your subconscious is your first thought. That is where your first thought comes from.
Yes.
But then if you can realize that thought and acknowledge that it's not the right thought, then you can change it to something else.
Absolutely. So that would bring us to rule number 2, which is who you are in sympathetic is not who you are in parasympathetic.
Yes.
So
exactly.
The history of that one, what goes on, I guess the concept that goes with that understanding is that when we're young and experience traumatic things or chronically stressful things, it's not like you have to experience one terrible thing. It might be like just a rough divorce where there's a lot of separation anxiety for months or years. Then that causes the body to remain in a state of kind of chronic anxiety, a chronic, not quite panic mode, but in consistent fear mode. And when we're scared, that's our sympathetic nervous system trying to keep us safe. When we're in that chronic state of sympathetic arousal, in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, most of our responses are born of fear, or they're born of born out of that toxic shame.
Exactly.
So, rule number 4 is we must slow down to speed up. And it's doing exactly what, and you just offered a precise example of that. The first thing that comes out of my mouth is oftentimes born out of out of a trauma history, out of these fear-based thinking, this reactive and often aggressive or overly submissive, that fight, flight, freeze response. So we slow down, take a few deep breaths, and there's a whole chapter on how to, when we slow down, how do we breathe in such a way that shuts down our sympathetic nervous system and activates our rest and digest parasympathetic. So when you get good at it, you see somebody who's really good at it, they can be wound up for a second, take a few breaths. And in that breathing, while breathing, we start with the statement, I am not going to react to this situation, but instead I'm going to proactively formulate a game plan according to my values and my beliefs and what I want to do and where I want to be. So it's according to, I'm not going to react, I'm going to act according to goals and values.
Yeah.
And once we practice it and train ourselves to do that, we can go from being negative to positive in a couple of breaths with a couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
Now it does take, months and months and months of practicing to do that.
Yep.
But again, it's one of those things that just unlocks the potential to a proactive in like deliberate life and choices and moments instead
It
of
does.
reacting
Mm-hmm.
according to these subconscious. Man, a lot of negative, a lot of fear based, a lot of self-loathing, a lot of just negative
Yep.
stuff, you know.
Yep. And I love that you brought up breathing. Just stop to breathe. I do it multiple times a day just to bring myself back, calm down if I'm getting overwhelmed or stressed out or anything like that. Just stop and breathe.
Luckily, there's been a lot of great instruction on breathing.
Mm-hmm.
In the book for chapter 4, chapter 2 or 4, I forget where that breathing tutorial is. I focus very specifically on what it takes to go from the survival mode to rest and digest mode, what it takes to calm us down. And so that's really looking at our natural response to danger and then directly addressing that. But once you have that foundational level, there are so many advanced ways of breathing. And like I work with a lot of the clients I work with after they learn how to get themselves out of that chronic state. Just alone, well, next you want to do it around other people. So like yoga is a good environment where oftentimes yoga instructors are consistently saying, breathe through this, breathe in that way. They say breathe like 30 different times in an hour. It's good repetitive practice. And then they just have so many different breathing tutorials and things out there.
Oh, yeah.
I originally hated doing the breathing stuff. It was so boring to me. I really like the cognitive stuff. I really like the challenging cognitive stuff. But after about a year of working with clients, and I'd go through the full hour tutorial, after about a year, I realized, man, I am a lot more of an anxious individual than I previously thought. I need this stuff. So I started practicing more of what I preach and really got into it. And there's years later, I mean, decades later, actually, maybe about 6 years ago, I was snorkeling somewhere, and on the little tour, and somebody said, "Man, you pretty good at snorkeling. You need to try out that free diving." I said, "What's that?" I had no idea. So I said, "No." I looked into free dive, and it turns out, man, it's this whole world of super advanced breathing methods and learning the science of the body.
Yeah.
To where people can hold their breath. The world record is somewhere like 12 minutes or something like that. Hold the breath underwater for 12 minutes.
Wow.
And that's of natural breathing. If you hyperoxygenate, the world record is like 22 minutes or something. Which is, I'm almost broken 4 minutes. I'm still like amateur, right? The intermediate people are in the 4 to 6, 7 minute range. I mean, it's just amazing. But you have to demonstrate amazing control over your mind, all these soothing, calming thoughts, and I don't know. I'm gonna get there. I will break 4 minutes this year, and I'm hoping to get into that 5, 6 minute range next year.
There you go.
Which, again, goes with that. 2 rules, kind of the education and training.
Yep.
Which is, and then rule number 20 is we want to make it normal. We say make what normal? Make all the first 19 rules normal. Make it a normal thing in your life to constantly seek out education and training environments that force you to continue to grow. I'm sure after you learned how to walk and drive, you didn't stop pushing yourself. I mean, do you still have a fitness routine or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I exercise almost every day. Constant. You gotta keep going. Yep.
Make it normal. It's now you get there, and when it comes to trauma stuff, and you don't, when it comes to somebody who's experienced a bit of stress and trauma in their childhood, you don't get to a point and then, it's all done, all healed, I'm good, I'm done.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. We want to make it a normal lifestyle of challenging ourselves to all these rules and challenging ourselves to keep educating and keep training, But the cool part is when you do, if you keep pushing yourself in these ways and keep introspecting and learning how to think differently, and excel, you end up being able to function so much, more advanced than people just kind of going along and never
Yeah.
look at learning about themselves and learning how we think and how we function.
Yeah, and you actually start to look at the world differently. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
Like, for me, like, the world is a better place now than 3 years ago when I was at my darkest time. And the world didn't change. I changed.
Yeah.
I changed, and I made the world better. Like,
remove some of those self-limiting thoughts and behaviors and habits, in order to see more of what you're made of and what you can do. And I do want to go back to that toxic thing, because so I heard you say that this podcast offered these numerous skills and mindset that unlocked more of your potential.
Yep.
And helped you to take that toxic shame and kind of throw it in the trash and kind of go in the other direction, which is to be not just I would hope not just accepting of yourself, but even celebrating your capabilities and what you can do. And I think I know there's a lot of people in various situations with chronic illnesses or special needs where they absolutely are dependent. And therefore, where do we do there with the toxic shame part? And there, I guess, let's see, another rule is, I forgot which one, number 19, it's not a contest. Trauma's just bad and sad. It's kind of this, it's not a contest. I don't need to be the most productive person in the world, but it's the practice attempting to contribute to the family or to yourself and to take care of yourself. It's that process of it. Not the level of functioning.
Yeah, and like, I have a note on my desk. It simply says, be better. That's it. Be better.
Perfect. Yes.
Just be better yourself.
Wherever you are, just keep doing so.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about somebody who is dependent to a larger degree than you or I, very dependent, well, that is really hard. It's hard to accept. It's hard to accept the kindness of other people. It's hard to accept that.
It is.
But when we accept whatever part is necessary and then maintain exactly that, be better, do more. In what way can I work towards the betterment of the family or the school or the community or whatever? To have some sense of that contributing to outside of just feeding myself,
Yeah, and you can always do more, I feel like. I mean, there's individuals who are unable, let's say, to do things. And that's why I like to talk to parents or caregivers. It's like, okay, it's kind of on you as a parent or a caregiver at that stage, let's say, to kind of give that person the best quality of life that they can, but also take care of yourself, but just, it's hard to find that happy medium, but it's like, I don't know, I feel like there's always more that anybody can do, and that can just be thoughts, just your thoughts alone. If you improve your thoughts,
sometimes absolutely improve your thoughts and improve the education. Sometimes it's sometimes doing better doesn't mean doing more. It means sometimes it means doing less. Sometimes the caretakers are just so hard on themselves, and so they break their own lives down so much.
Yep.
And it's like, so sometimes taking that time to practice better self-care benefits everyone all the way around. And so sometimes, like in the sports world, a lot of the greatest advances are not in being tougher on the body. It's been in learning how to relax better and heal better. And how do we relax, and how do we heal faster? How do we recover faster from the workout? So sometimes it's doing better, recovering more, doing better, eating cleaner, doing better, chilling more, giving enough of rest and all that stuff. In other words, do better by doing smarter, not just harder or tougher or what have you,
Exactly.
So I didn't go through all the rules at all, nor do I plan to. I'm not sure if
we can keep going.
I'm trying to think of anyone others that come to mind for our conversation here. Slow us down. Let's see. Just right after what we just said was rule number 8 is practice treating yourself in a self-loving and self-respecting fashion. Which is when somebody's encountered a bit of trauma stuff, oftentimes, but not oftentimes, it's almost all the time. When it's encountered as a kid has difficult time thinking outside of their own brain, right? So they kind of like to a kid, the world revolves around them. So a bad thing is happening in the world is because they did something wrong, because they are, and even as an adult, you might cognitively be able to say, well, yeah, of course it wasn't my fault. I know I didn't cause my parents divorced. But then when we get into these moments with our significant others where I'm feeling a little bit the fear of rejection, that's when those trauma lies come out, and I treat myself poorly and kind of hate myself and that kind of stuff. So that's where that rule comes in, where I have to practice, even when I don't feel like it, treating myself in a self-loving and self-respecting fashion. And if I truly love myself and respect myself, and I go more into it in the chapter to understand, we want to do that in an increasingly educated, increasingly mature, increasingly like scientific way. Like for example, there's a kid, if I want to treat myself in a loving fashion, I'll treat myself to the candy cupboard, and eat a bunch of stuff. I love myself. I'm gonna feed myself this bunch of, but as an adult, I know that's kind of disrespecting my body by destroying it with a bunch of refined sugars and whatnot. So it's a skill to develop, treat ourselves in self-loving and increasingly mature and educated, self-respecting fashion. And that's the one where I feel like you have just you and your podcast has a tremendous amount to offer, as far as, number one, addressing that rule about secrets destroyed. Even when it's uncomfortable, we're just going to go ahead and talk about this stuff. So for this massive population who, where do they go to hear more of these conversations just openly discussed? That we get to just talk about and hear about it. Just like you heard about that mindset, you get to do that in this realm. And then we get to work on the education part and educating parents about how do you treat yourself and your kid in a self-loving and self-respecting fashion. How do we stay away from that pendulum effect? Hitting that healthy middle ground. How do we not overindulge? By the way, the overindulging part, I go into it in the chapter, that the correction for overindulging, where I love this kid so much, and because they're impaired, I perceive them as impaired in some way. I want to do everything for them out of love. The one good method that we call mentor parenting. Mentor parenting is where
I like that.
I love it. This guy James Fogarty out in California, he has some went to one of his continuing education courses, and that just opened my eyes to this. It's a real simple formula where when the kid does something that is negative, you provide one little consequence. And it has to be a behavioral consequence, by the way. A lot of times parents want to talk their little child into being a good human being. The kids just listen to the talking, but then when there's no consequence, it doesn't do anything. So just a little consequence, doesn't need to be the huge one, just a consequence. And then after the consequence is done, it's a little timeout or take away the cell phone for 10 minutes or whatever the little consequence is. After that, then we have this discussion of life lessons. It's communicating after the consequence. So the kid does something bad or does something good. There's a negative or a positive consequence. And then after that, we have a little talk about it. Well, why do you think you got that consequence, the good one or the bad one? And why do you think that'll set you up to be a good adult, a good, strong, functioning, independent, healthy, happy adult? So the mentor part is both parts of that. Offering natural consequences to somebody's behaviors. Like if you just don't try, okay, well then you're not going to get this. When you do try, here's the reward. That's the natural consequences. And then adding to that, the cognitive understanding, like imparting that parental wisdom to the kid. The problem comes, the overindulging part comes, the problem comes when you have a hard time, when parents have a hard time offering that discipline. It can be hard to offer consequences when you just feel so bad for somebody, I don't want them to suffer anymore, so I don't want to give this consequence. I just want to talk to them, and hopefully they'll absorb it, and it just doesn't work very well. So
there has to be consequences for everything, and I like how you put it, good and bad. Your child could do something good, and you can reward them with ice cream or something,
Absolutely. Their favorite activity, ice cream, a little outing, go and play or what have you. Under the mentor parenting, there's like a strong focus on, we would like it to be like 95% positive. There's this old myth about, you don't want to just all go around and pat each other on the back for stuff. And it's not necessarily that I'm patting them on the back for every little thing they do, but it's setting up an intelligent, consistent system of rewards that promotes ambition. It promotes hunger for more productivity, for more training, more learning. The whole carrot and the stick, you want to have 95% carrot and 5% stick, much more of the positive, right?
Exactly. That's awesome. And parenting is hard, but having resources like you, and who is that other guy you were talking about?
James Fogarty. I think his book was something like Overindulged Parenting and Overindulged Children and Conduct Disorders. A Parent's Guide to Mentoring, something like that. That's his book. It's kind of hard to find, oddly. I really wish you would renew it or something. But
anybody listening, just look that up. Hopefully you can find it, because that I think would be very, very helpful.
He summarized the literature on it, and it's like I said, it's in it. I talk about it in that chapter chapter 16 on overindulgent dynamics. The dynamics are not just with parenting; it's also in regular relationships, two adult relationships. If I overindulge you and I just do everything for you, then you don't have to do it. And it's a big issue for people who've experienced rough childhoods oftentimes, because one of the survival responses is, a lot of people have heard of fight or flight, right? You either fight or you run away.
Yep.
Well, a third very natural response is freeze. When we're in a moment of panic, we freeze. And if you freeze consistently throughout childhood, you begin to enter into these what they call dissociative states, where your mind kind of dissociates from your body. So the freeze response often leads to a lot of dissociation in adulthood. So we have fight, flight, freeze. But then there's a fourth one that's more recently been discussed or studied, which is called fawning. And it's actually very, very common for kids who were raised in very dysfunctional or rough families, because a child really doesn't have the opportunity to fight. They're not going to successfully fight adults in their own home. Flight doesn't really work. They can't run away because they're a kid, so therefore flight doesn't work that well. Freeze, you can only freeze for so long, and so fawning oftentimes becomes the default survival method for kids raised in in these rough family situations. So as adults, they fawn, and fawning is when you kind of very submissively or cater to the scariest person in the room, or the most powerful person in the room. And in childhood, that might be whoever is the most violent or the most manipulative or whatnot. But then as adults, these survivors will select a significant other, their husband or wife or partner, and on accident they fawn and they cater to that person's every little whim. They overindulge that person on accident, out of love and out of desire to dote on them. But then it ends up causing problems. You give, and you teach the other person to just take. And then you can't help but feel resentful. No, eventually you start developing resentments.
Oh, yeah. And resentment is, in my opinion, that's one of the most toxic traits, I think. It's
absolutely. Especially when they're not following the secrets destroy rule and keep it secret until the resentment builds so much that they don't say, hey, I don't like that. They explode. I can't believe you've been doing that to me for 3 years. You're like, whoa, wait.
Exactly.
I didn't know you didn't. Wait, what are you talking about? So a lot of the clients that I work with was just teaching them how to treat themselves in a self-loving and self-respecting fashion, which is basic self-advocacy. Just speaking up. Hey, I don't like this, or this doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me anymore. I want this, not that. Just speaking up. And so often their spouses or significant others were completely open to it. No problem. They just didn't know. That person, their partner, was so full of toxic shame that they did not feel they had the right to speak up whatsoever about these things that have been just building resentment for years and years.
Yeah, and that's kind of a problem we all face, because I feel like 99% of the time we are afraid to speak up because we think the response is going to be 100 times worse than it actually is going to be.
Yes, and unfortunately, a lot of people who grew up in these environments, a lot of these kids, they learned for a fact that when they spoke up, they caught beatings and they caught these rough consequences. And so, I see it as whatever. Let's say a kid is raised in a healthy enough family, then he has a natural response to whatever happens in life. Well, when you've encountered a lot of trauma in the childhood, I think of it as whatever the response is, the reaction is like kind of ramped up on steroids. So, if I feel a little bit of shame, or somebody who's experienced a lot of trauma in their childhood feels a toxic level of intense shame, it's ramped up on steroids, So when somebody is a little bit scared of speaking up for himself, someone who's experienced trauma in their childhood and their brain, their young brain remembers, when I speak up, terrible things happen. Well, then they're really terrified to speak up as an adult. And it often does take some environment like a therapist or a coach, a trauma coach, or life coach that is able to help with this process of very slow and small steps. Start speaking up.
Yep.
And once you start speaking up and you see the other person's response to it, like you said, 99 out of 100 as adults, the person's response is really surprisingly wonderful or whatnot,
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
and sometimes it is not a good response. But even that's important. When they finally speak up,
yep.
Hey, I've been paying all the rent for 10 years now. Would you mind paying $10 to add to the rent? What? I can't believe this. And they leave. Well, that's very informative,
Yeah.
It's very important. So as we learn to speak up, we also have to learn how to get outside of ourselves and see what the other person's reaction is. Is it respectful and loving, or is it disrespectful and selfish? So the self-advocacy thing it's a complex skill that
it is.
Kind of like you were saying with that. Go ahead.
And what I've learned is you need to be mindful of the words you use and in what order you use them. You have to word it the right way, otherwise it can be taken in a totally different way. Communication is difficult. It's something that I'm constantly learning about. Constantly, I'm so obsessed with communication lately because I realized I'm not a great communicator. I wasn't. I'm better now, but not where I want to be. And I think communication is something that you can grow your whole life. It doesn't have like an end goal, but I'm looking to improve every day.
Absolutely.
And
I have in my book, there's a communication cheat sheet. Right. And it just goes, and instead of it being like simplified, I kind of went the other route and made it intentionally step by step, very precise. Listen actively, 1, 2, 3. Summarize, 1, 2, 3. Acknowledge, boom, boom, boom. Those are the receptive phases. And then the expressive phase, and what do we put it in what order? Because it really makes a difference. Like, when we go to express ourselves, we throw out our emotions first, then the thoughts, and then the goal for relationship, and then precisely what we want. We'll often get the best response. And then once we get practice at just following those steps, next is the meta skill of managing our own body language while doing those steps. I can do those steps, but if I'm tight and you can hear the anger in my voice and see it on my face, then even if I did the steps all perfectly, the other person is reading my body language and is responding to that instead of what I'm saying. So we have the step-by-step skills. Then we have that awareness of body language, and that breathing and controlled breathing comes back in for me to keep my emotions in check so that I can speak clearly and put out that body language that is most conducive to a positive conversation. And then in my book, I do advocate this other guy. There's this guy, Chris Voss. This book is Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as Though Your Life Depends on It. Once you have
it's a great book.
Once you have the skill of this basic communication cheat sheet and the meta skill of maintaining your calm and self-awareness in these difficult relationship conversations, well, the next above that are these advanced self-advocacy skills or some of which are presented in Chris Voss's book about, which is kind of funny because it's about, he was a hostage negotiator for the FBI, right? But his goal was to establish a relationship with the hostage taker, establish trust and mutual empathy, and then have an outcome that is the least amount of violence possible. Well, what a great goal to have in a between two partners or a relationship or two spouses. We want the least amount of violence or damage done. We want mutual empathy. And we want to help each other out as best as we can, in spite of the fact that we're having difficulty about this issue. So yeah, communication it's not just communication. A lot of times I used to think of communication as communication and negotiation as trickery. But it's not. I think of it as engagement. How do we engage with other human beings? Moving our lips is one way, but that's just a tiny part of communication. It's body language, the words, like you said, the order that you put the words in, and then these advanced self-advocacy things that are all about deeper and deeper engagement with the people that we want to be in wonderful relationships with. And that's a lot of skills. Oftentimes, when kids are raised in some of these difficult environments, they're just not taught these communication skills or these engagement skills. They weren't modeled. They weren't taught. And so where do they learn them? That's where the self-education and self-empowerment comes in, and listening to podcasts like yours and like that other guys that you were talking about, that just floods the brain with these educational and training and positive insights. Kind of, what do you call it? It's like a positive brainwashing to flush out the negative brainwashing of childhood or those self-imposed kind of negativity and obstacles. Yeah,
it is exactly. So my slogan is, your abilities are infinite. What does it mean to you?
Oh man, number one, I just love it. I think when I was 10 years old, I swam. I was a big swimmer and trained really hard all year. I mean, hard, like to the point of I'd be in tears at the end of a lot of these workouts because it was just so much. But at the end of it, I won the 10 and under state swim meet, the state swim meet. So I was the fastest 10-year-old boy in the state of Louisiana, and it taught me. It taught me, number one, if I put my mind to something, I can do it, which is huge. It's good. That's what comes to mind when you say infinite abilities. Yeah. It's amazing what anyone can do. It's mind-boggling what we can do as human beings. It's mind-boggling. And then the next step it becomes to me is like, well, where do I want to aim that? What do I want to focus on? Is it relationships? Is it financial success? Is it a business or whatnot? I love that concept. It's infinite abilities. It's beautiful, man. And it's just very true.
Yeah, exactly. And your response was beautiful, like incredible. Thank you. So, do you have any last words of wisdom?
Oh my goodness. To those who have experienced a lot of rough childhoods, I think it's we have to find places, find people that enable us to talk about absolutely everything. Find that guidance that assists us with getting on this path, this lifestyle path of addressing these things, learning how to love ourselves, accept ourselves first, and then love ourselves, and then thrive. It's just don't stop. Keep listening to these types of podcasts. Keep reading. Keep hire professionals when you have the resources to do so. Sometimes you can hire a coach or therapist and just go to 3 or 4 sessions and say, give me some stuff to work on, and these little investments, and then that'll get you a year's worth of challenges, and then you come back. Adopt that lifestyle of constant self-challenges, self-challenging, self-empowerment, self-improvement, and you'll be amazed after 3 years where you'll be. You'll be amazed where you are in 5, and in 10 you just you'll remember that where you were,
Yep.
but it'll just feel like a different reality. So it's possible. It's there. Yeah.
Yep. The best investment is investing in yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. You make your best, make yourself the best, and then that makes you into the best producer of good. You can do more good for the people around you once you've invested in yourself and built your own skills up, your own happiness, your own education, your own like skill sets. You become more valuable to your family, more valuable to the community, more valuable, Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I forget about those parts. Let's see. My website is ErnestEllenderPhD.com. My book is on Amazon. It's called This Is How We Heal from Painful Childhoods. And then there's also a website just for the book called healfromchildhood.com. Yeah, so any one of those 3 places would be great. Hopefully, I hope to do my own YouTube channel very soon. I'm going to get that started, but not yet.
Good. Awesome. So, yeah, I'll put all your links down in the show notes so everybody can find you. And everybody, just stop what you're doing right now and go and buy his book. I think everybody needs it. I know after this, I'm going on Amazon and I'm ordering it. So let's go.
Awesome, man. And Nick, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I enjoyed our talk the other day. And then just thinking about all this is wonderful. And I think this podcast is, again, just offers so much to us listeners into in forms of education and self-love and all those kinds of things. It's just wonderful, man. So thank you for this opportunity, and hope you keep it up, man.
Oh, yeah, and thank you. It was an honor having you on the show. This was incredible.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this show, please go ahead and share it on your Instagram story and tag me here, the Nick Yerhart. Also, go ahead and share it anywhere else that you see fit, because the only way that I can grow this is by you guys sharing it. I don't sell anything on here. I don't have any sponsors. So let's just get it out there by word of mouth and help more people. Alright, everyone. Remember, your abilities are infinite.